everyone, this is Sam Black with Drafting Archetypes, and today we're going to be discussing blue-green in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, or as the title says, blue-green Bonny Pall, which I will explain shortly. First of all, as always, the notes are available to follow along at patreon.com/draftingarchetypes. And looking at blue-green stats-wise, blue-green is the least drafted color pair, but it only has a little bit below average win rate. But a few things stop me from saying that suggests that it's underdrafted. First, it still does have a below average win rate, so it's not like there's a lot of value to be gained there. And second, I suspect most of its win rate is coming from exactly Bonny Pall. And the reason that I suspect that is, I suppose, twofold. First, I spent some time looking at recent trophy decks on 17 lands, and I'm pretty sure that over 75% of the trophy decks that I looked at, I think like more than that, I'm kind of rounding down, that were blue-green had Bonny Pall. And the other reason is kind of the reason for that, which is outside of Oko, there are very few cards in the set that would make someone want to draft blue-green in particular. None of the uncommons are particularly good or really like a draw to play blue-green. Doc Orlock it's debatable whether you would want to put it in a blue-green deck at the end of the draft if you drafted it, and it's certainly not worth trying to draft around. Decisive Denial is similarly mediocre, and Make Your Own Luck is a strong card, but not like a great card to take early. It's not like a bomb, and it's very easy to splash. So it's not like a strong pull to draft a dedicated blue-green deck. So that means that you could draft blue-green if you just happen to see good blue and green cards, but most likely there's going to be like some kind of gold card that's going to pull you towards something else, because there are 3 gold uncommons in each color pair in this set because of the prosperity sheet, and many of them are good, and the blue-green ones aren't. So to get pulled into blue-green by a single card, it has to be rare or mythic, and there are 2 different Dokos that could both theoretically do it, but Bonny Pall is rare and better than both of them. And so Bonny Pall also, while it's technically like it's good enough to splash, even if you're like trying to splash the double blue, I've tried to splash Bonny Pall off of some ways to make treasures and stuff, and I would do that again. But it's not an easy splash because it's blue-blue. You can splash the green, especially in like a blue-black control deck or something. But often, if you're going to play green, it wants to be a base color because green offers fixing and stuff. So it makes sense to try to draft blue-green if you have Bonny Pall. And it makes very little sense to try to draft blue-green otherwise. Especially because looking past the signpost, or maybe not even looking past them, maybe kind of because of them, blue-green is a very low synergy deck. So you're not going to find like the theoretical theme of blue-green is plot, ... There's no real payoff for plot. There's theoretically like Doc Orlock is a plot enabler, but it's very difficult to get like a sufficient density of plot cards that Doc is really doing anything that matters. And so blue-green is just extremely low synergy. So you're not going to find some cards that like make sense. Like you're not going to discover that like the blue-green lane is open because you can make your cards better than the sum of their parts by doing the blue-green thing. Because if there are cards that get better than the sum of their parts when they're combined in that way, they don't reach good. They reach adequate when you combine them because they're bad at like baseline. Cards like Djinn of Fool's Fall and even some better looking ones like Outlaw Stitcher. Jennifool's Fall is the 5 mana 4/3 flyer that plots for 4. Outlaw Stitcher is the 1/4 that plots for 5, otherwise costs 4, and makes a zombie with 2+1/+1 counters, or maybe just 2 bigger. I don't remember his counters, or it gets a size based on the number of spells cast. Visage Bandit, the clone that plots. Even Canyon Crab, which seems like a kind of good card, has like very unimpressive stats. Incidentally, Outlaw Stitcher, Canyon Crab, and Visage Bandit are all basically the same at like 53.7% win rate in blue green, which is to say they're all below average cards in blue green. So there's not really a dream to chase here. There's nothing that's going to pull someone into this lane. There's not really even a lane to be in. It's just some colors and some cards. So most of the time, I suspect that anyone ends up with an actual blue-green deck, it's because of Bonny Pall. Maybe Bonny Pall by itself doesn't account for over 50% of blue-green decks, but it does account for that many trophies because you're so much more likely to win if you have Bonny Pall than if you don't. So that's kind of what's going on, is you're playing blue-green because you got a blue-green bomb, and then you need to support it. So the question is, if blue-green is so bad, are you even supposed to take Bonny Pall? Yes, of course. Are you even supposed to draft blue-green rather than playing something else and splashing Bonny Pall if you open it? So the win rate for blue-green decks that contain Bonny Pall is 57.9%, which is better than every archetype except for green-white, which is a little bit above that. And the win rate for games played with Bonny Pall that are in blue-green decks is like 0.5% better than the aggregate win rate for games for played by decks with Bonny Pall, like that are not necessarily like specifically blue-green decks, which is to say, given that your deck has Bonny Pall, it is an above average deck, and it's better if you're blue-green than if you're something else. And the only like better start would be if you somehow knew that green-white was open, and so you could have an average green-white deck, but like you can't just go into a draft choosing to have an average green-white deck, because most people who draft green-white aren't forcing it. They're in a seat where something puts them into green-white for some reason. So you can't just like be like, I'm going to pass this Bonny Pall because green-white wins more, obviously. So yes, you should take Bonny Pall. From there, you should preferentially try to be blue-green, but it's not a big deal. And then the question is, so what is the blue-green deck? What cards do you play? And the answer is, you're a low synergy deck with a bomb. And that's everything you need to know in a certain way of looking at it. You're not trying to become high synergy, and you are trying to cast your bomb, which means that you want to be playing defensive cards. You want to try to extend the game to find your bomb, and you want to be prepared to make the most of your bomb. Like if someone answers it, you would like to be able to get it back. For that reason, well, for a lot of reasons, splashing is good and common in blue-green. That's normal. Like in almost every set, splashing is common in blue-green. This set is certainly not an exception. Blue has a bunch of card draw, green has fixing, the lands fix really well, and given that you're most likely drafting around Bonny Pall, every single green-black uncommon, all 3 of them, allows you to return Bonny Pall from your graveyard to your hand or to play. So to get it back to play it again. So all of those are among the best cards you could have in your deck. So you're very likely to want to splash black for recursion, maybe a little bit of removal, white for removal, red for removal or maybe other bombs, or maybe even cheap defensive cards. Like you could splash red removal. I mean, I guess that's just red removal. So also Crom is like a reasonable card to splash. But the big picture here is most importantly, don't try to do the plot thing. Loan Shark is playable but not great. Free Strider Commando, the 3 mana 3/3 that plots for 4 and has 2+1/+1 counters if you didn't spend mana for it, is extremely overplayed. Loan Shark is the most played common in blue green and is very far from the best. Loan Shark is a heavily overplayed playable card. Free Strider Commando is as much overplayed but not as played, but considerably worse. And then Djinn of Fool's Fall is still like appreciably played and pretty actively bad. The only reason I don't say don't play any of the plot stuff is that Spinewood's Paladin, the 5 mana 4/5 that gains 5/4 trample that gains 3 life and plots for 4, is very good. It's one of the best commons in the archetype. It's just like good stats. The life gain is important for your defensive deck. So that one's good. The others are not really where you want to be. So what you do want is any common removal that doesn't cost like black or whatever. Like you don't really want to try to like splash double pip removal, but any other common removal spell would be fine. Any of the good big creatures like Spinewood Paladin and Cactarantula, and fixing like Dance of the Tumbleweeds, which is kind of also a big creature, and Patient Naturalist, the 2/3 that mills 3 cards and puts land from among them into your hand or makes a treasure if there isn't a land, and Hard Bristle Bandit, the 1/1 that taps for a mana of any color. So cards that ramp you to your big creatures and enable your splash. Big creatures removal. There's some kind of weird like low sample size data that supports this. Like for example, the red-white desert has the highest win rate among all of the common deserts in blue-green, which is probably mostly just noise, but also suggests that like maybe blue-green does well when it's like double splashing. And like Mystical Tether has the highest game in hand win rate of any common, higher than Throw from the Saddle, which again, probably mostly just noise. I personally wouldn't expect to generally take Mystical Tether over Throw from the Saddle in a blue-green deck, but really points to how little punishment there is for cards of other colors, and how much you just like want to splash and take the cards that work in your deck, which is to say, the removal, card advantage, good blockers. Speaking of card advantage, Plan the Heist and Metamorphic Blast, so the uncommon draw 3 and the uncommon Spree that draws 2 and makes a creature an 0/1, both perform very well. You are looking to draw cards. Again, you're looking to make land drops to cast big creatures, and you're looking to trade 1-for-1 a lot with the removal, and you're looking to make sure that you actually draw your bomb, which is to say Bonny Pall. So you're definitely looking for those things. Another card that is worth thinking about is Ankle Biter. Ankle Biter's not a card I'm generally looking to put in my decks. Most green decks are pretty aggressive and don't benefit very much from a 1/1 Death Touch. But because blue-green is pretty solidly defensive, there you can have some aggressive starts with like Grizzlies and Repulse and Jailbreak Scheme. So the card that like the the card that puts a creature from there to a creature onto the top or bottom of your opponent's deck. And like bounce spells and stuff, like you can end up having aggressive draws, but you're not ever like I don't think you want to draft your deck as an aggro deck, even if sometimes you'll be able to like take advantage of like tempo when you curve out. Mostly you're going to be blocking, and Ankle Biter does that very well, and spending 1 mana for a creature that's going to prevent some damage and probably trade up on mana is really good when you have these draw 2 and draw 3 cards in your deck. So because of pairing it with blue card draw, Ankle Biter fits really well here. Not a card I'm looking to play anywhere else, but it's nice. It's also a cheap card to like draw a card off your Loan Shark or whatever. If you you might not want to plot Loan Shark on 4. Maybe you need to play something to the board then on 5 you can maybe play like Ankle Biter plus Loan Shark if for some reason you haven't already played your Ankle Biter. Maybe on turn 3 you drew it and wanted to set that up or whatever. The only other thing I wanted to mention was just pointing out the top performing blue and green uncommons. I think that if you've been paying attention to the win rates of cards in general, it's basically what you'd expect because blue green being low synergy, there aren't going to be cards that perform much better in blue green than they do in general. So the good blue and green uncommons for blue green are basically just the good blue and green uncommons. So like Outcaster Greenblade. Incidentally, I think Outcaster Greenblade specifically might be part of the reason that the red-white desert has a high win rate in blue-green, because most of the time you don't play the red-white desert if you're blue-green, but Outcaster Greenblade would be a reason to, just because you're a lot more likely to look for random deserts and to splash and stuff, and Outcaster Greenblade being one of the best cards, if your deck, like if you're playing the red white desert, it might point to there being multiple Outcaster Greenblades in your deck, which would point to your deck being stronger overall. So Outcaster Greenblade, followed by Spinewood's Armadillo, the 7/7 reach ward 3 that you can discard for a land and gain 3 life. Repulse, the bounce spell that draws a card for 3. Marauding Sphinx, the 3/5 vigilance ward 2 that surveils when you commit a crime. Metamorphic Blast and Plan the Heist, the card draw spells that I already mentioned, and Clear Shot, the instant +1/+1, and then a creature deals damage equal to its power to another creature for 2 and a green. So, yeah, those are the cards that I think are noteworthy. Again, the main points here are no, there's no trick. There really just isn't much of a reason to draft blue-green if you don't have blue-green bombs. The blue-green uncommons do not count. You shouldn't worry about any of the plot stuff ever. Like, don't try to draft the Doc Orlock deck. I've done that before. I ended up with a pretty good deck. I ended up cutting all the blue cards and playing mono green with a bunch of relatively synergistic plot cards. Like, because I was mono green, I had a bunch of big creatures, and so I was playing Tumbleweed Risings that ended up pretty good. But the Doc Orlock part of it didn't end up mattering since I didn't even put it in my deck. So yeah, like I have tried Doc Orlock for science a little bit, kind of. I've looked at the stats. I've looked at the trophy decks. There's nothing there. Don't try to do the plot thing. Just draft a normal, like, control deck with some splashes and some bombs. Be prepared to block. Don't fall behind. Play your 2-mana 3/3 defenders. They can only attack if you have a 4-power creature. You'll probably have a 4-power creature. Probably try to get some, creatures with reach and stuff in there because you're playing a defensive deck, and draw cards until you find your bomb. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to chat for any other questions or discussion. And as always, I want to thank the newest patron. So, thank you very much, Matthew. If anyone else is interested in becoming a patron, supporting the podcast, check out patreon.com/draftingarchetypes to do that. My experience, failed forwarding is better in blue-green than other color combos. That makes sense. You are a little bit more interested in buying time. Your creatures are bigger than your opponent's creatures, so sometimes they're gonna try to. I mean, there aren't really that many combat tricks that let little creatures beat big creatures, but block plus bounce is generally good against combat tricks. Again, that's not really a thing in this set, but you have some good creatures to bounce and save. Tempo play is kind of important when you have a bunch of card advantage and stuff. I'm not super high on failed forwarding, but I could see it being better a little bit here than other color combos. I think you're also more likely to have like high power creature heavy draws that can like put your opponent on the back foot, and then you can like punish them when they're trying to stabilize with failed forwarding. Does this deck want graveyard recursion to replay rescue big stuff? Yes, very, very much so. The Mourner's Surprise is one of the more splashable black commons, and all of the black uncommons are extremely high priorities. Is blue green the best shell for splashing in the format, or could other color combinations like green black be better for that? I mean, at a certain point, it's kind of like, what are we really asking about, right? Like, multicolor green is the best place for being multicolor because it's green, so you get like your patient naturalists and your hard bristle bandits and your dance the tumbleweeds, and so like, but like once you're like sufficiently like reveling in the fact that you're good at splashing, like what's the difference between a blue green deck splashing black, a black green deck splashing blue, a green red deck splashing blue and black? Like once you're splashy enough, you're kind of just green X. If you make something a Cactarantula with hexproof, would you draw a card? If your opponent has targeted a Cactarantula and you give it hexproof, you'll still draw a card for the Cactarantula and your Cactarantula won't die. If you turn something else into a Cactarantula, at the moment that it became targeted, it was not a Cactarantula, so no trigger was generated. And if you make it a Cactarantula, there's not a moment where the trigger would become where it's going to become targeted because it has hexproof. So there's no way to like draw a card and save a creature there. Do I value Voracious Varmint a little higher to remove Oblivion Rings? Yes, a little bit higher. Like it's a nice 2-drop to have. You have Bonny Pall to get Bonny Pall back if it gets exiled. Especially if you have like black recursion and the thing that you're afraid of is it getting exiled. Are there bombs and other colors that go in a blue-green base particularly well? I mean, the honest answer here is just going to be anything that only costs a single pip that isn't blue or green. So, I mean, like a bomb that would be a particularly poor splash for blue green would be like Rakdos the Muscle because it costs 3 non blue or green pips, where a bomb that would, or like a card that would be a very good fit would be like Roxanne because it only needs a single non-blue or green pip. You can cast it like at the optimal time if you tumbleweeds for your like missing red, and it like is gonna play really well with your game plan. It's gonna give you mana to use on drawing additional cards and playing more big stuff. So I guess Roxanne would be my example of bomb that plays particularly well here, and stuff that's like hard to cast, like gold cards where neither side is blue or green, would be the ones that like don't fit particularly well here. Also, things like the Great Train Heist that want you to be like wide aggressive when you're neither of those things wouldn't fit very well here. Hellspur Posse Boss would not be a card I'd be excited about splashing in blue green, for example. All right, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. Uh, I think it's valuable to know not to like it's always important to know which traps to avoid, and the easiest traps to fall into are pursuing set themes that like aren't supported enough to really be worth pursuing. So, I say this as someone who has a few times been tempted to like try to pursue Doc Orlock. I've seen people say that they've like seen it do impressive things once or twice. I've also seen a lot of people say that it's been bad and doesn't do anything. But at the same time that it's useful to know that, there's not a lot to say about there's nothing here, stay away. And this isn't like, again, blue green has a below average win rate, but not very much below. It's not one of the like bad archetypes. It's not terrible to be in blue green. It's just that it's drafted very rarely for the reason that there's not much of a reason to draft it. And so mostly this is just saying if you see like a blue green gold card, sixth pick in pack one, that doesn't mean anything. Don't like pivot into blue green because blue green as a lane is open, because blue green as a lane isn't a lane. It's just like not something that you should really consider without a bomb pulling you there. And then the details are just draft good cards. This is actually an interesting note to pick up real quick. What about Intimidation Campaign? Is that something that you would want in blue green? And the answer is no. Similarly, Nimble Brigand is a card that I like a lot, but it doesn't perform very well in blue green. And the reason for this is both of these cards are best when you fill your deck with really, really cheap spells, especially Intimidation Campaign, because it costs so much mana to draw the card. And blue green, more than any other deck, is not looking to be filled with cheap cards. Blue green is probably going to have the highest curve in the format by a considerable margin on average, and you're not going to be very good at committing crimes, with the exception that you do want some removal, you do want some deserts. You could go a little bit out of your way and end up with a decent number of crime triggers, but you're just like general deck composition isn't going to be such that Intimidation Campaign makes sense. You're not going to have time to use it very much. You're not like small ball enough to really value the drain ones. Like the point where you're winning, you're attacking with huge creatures, and it doesn't matter if your opponent has like taken 4 extra damage from your Intimidation Campaign triggers. And you don't care about the fact that it like gives you some kind of inevitability because you're getting that from the bigger numbers on your creatures. And you don't really need the like life gain that it's offering because you're just planning to like kill their evasive creatures and block most of their guys, and like you just don't really need life totals to be changing very much throughout the course of the game. So campaign is offering much less to blue green and synergizes much less well with what it's doing, and brigand is kind of like the same thing but much less so. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. So thanks everyone for listening. We are, I suppose, getting very close to the end of coverage of Outlaws of Thunder Junction as we get into Modern Horizons 3 previews. I'm not sure. I haven't thought through the schedule. I think I have one more week of Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Maybe it's 2, but that seems unlikely. Maybe it's 0, but I think that's also unlikely. So I'll update on that as needed. But MH3 is coming soon. MH3 will be the set that I'm focusing on once it comes out. So, like OTJ or not, we are wrapping it up shortly and moving on as per the release schedule. So that's all for now, and I'll see you next week. Bye.
Prepare for light speed.